Let's get started. So my name is Brad Winnett. I'm the president of Tracklt. Tracklt is a Los Angeles-based advanced consulting partner for Amazon Web Services. Our business can be divided into two areas, really. One is software development, and a lot of that is infrastructure as code for people for the other part of our business, which is around all things Amazon Web Services. Those can be the typical consulting kind of engagements you might be familiar with: architecture, design, deployment, optimization, helping manage the environment. And it can also be around things that are more strategic in nature in terms of consulting for how, when, where you use assets like the cloud, like AWS Cloud. What we're going to be talking about today is a really cool, interesting value-added offering that AWS has put together in conjunction with its partners like Tracklt. It's called the AWS Well-Architected Framework. What the Well-Architected Framework is, it's a very structured approach to looking at your workloads in your AWS infrastructure and looking for places where it can be optimized or holes that need to be filled or other things that should be addressed, so you're actually using the latest and greatest best practices. We'll talk a little bit about what that entails and how the program works and why it's really compelling for end user customers to find a consulting partner to help them with this. AWS actually will come in and help fund a bunch of the remediation efforts if areas are found for remediation. So let's dive into it a little bit and talk about just what the Well-Architected Framework Review is. If my technical difficulties. Let's try that again. Maybe I have to go through this page by page, which would be very bad. Hopefully it works this time. There we go. So what is the AWS Well-Architected Framework, and why does it exist? Well, it exists to help you improve and identify areas for improvement of your AWS infrastructure. AWS itself is very interested in this, because if for some reason you're having problems, security issues, you're not happy with what's going on at AWS, it reflects poorly on their services. And AWS is very incented to have happy customers, and they're very disincented to have bad press with people with their experiences with AWS. So this program is partially in response to that. It's also in response to how AWS does things internally. So internally to AWS, they have a very prescriptive way of looking at the infrastructure, how to optimize it, how to use it, how to plan for the future use of it, and how to provide true value-added infrastructure for their customers. So where can we improve? Very important is how do we lower or at least mitigate the risk to the environment, and that can be everything from security risks to potential outages to managing for disasters. There's a lot to go into that. As part of the framework, let's define what the remediations are that we've actually discovered along the way. And invariably, as we go through these with customers, there's always something. Nobody has the perfect infrastructure and architecture, and it might have been perfect 3 months or 6 months ago, but due to the nature of how people use the cloud, it could be different today. So it's something you want to keep your eye on over time as well. Are there areas for savings? Nobody wants to spend too much money, but especially given how the nature of how things change and how quickly they change in AWS. New infrastructure, new instance types, new ways of doing things, new services. Over time, there's almost always ways you can optimize your cost spend on AWS. How do we make informed decisions? The structure of the approach really gets you there. And it also really helps understand what some of the best practices are. A lot of times that's critical based on the partner that you use and where you are in your life cycle, but best practices do change over time. And in order to make the most of your investment in AWS, it's helpful to understand what those best practices are at that point in time. So AWS is really big on making these lists or pillars of things that are important to the business. In the context of the well-architected framework, there's really 5 pillars that they talk about. And we'll dive into what each one of these 5 pillars are in the upcoming slides. But in general, they can be classified in these 5 areas, making sure that operationally you're doing things the right way. Making sure, the second pillar, making sure that how you approach security, and not just the tactical parts of what you're doing today, but strategically how you're approaching security, is a core pillar of making sure that that's a strong one. Reliability. Are you architecting for when things go wrong? Are you architecting for making sure that as usage scales, that you still have a reliable and scalable infrastructure? Are you architected so that the performance is what it needs to be and where it needs to be, and can handle unforeseen changes in usage patterns? And then, of course, cost optimization, which is kind of self-explanatory. But these are the 5 pillars, and the idea is if the pillars aren't strong, your building's going to collapse or has potential to collapse. So let's talk about the 5 different pillars in a little more depth, and the structured approach to go about using them to understanding if you're well architected or not. So from an operational standpoint, there's a couple things that you really dig into, and each of these 5 pillars is a separate section of the actual interview process, by the way. And in each of those areas, there's 10 or a dozen or more questions that are really strategic in nature around each of these. So one of them, for example, in the operational excellence pillar, might be, what processes do you have around ensuring that the infrastructure you build can be automatically deployed and automated in such a way that you can incrementally make improvements over time? And then it digs into that as one of the questions, and strategically how you go about it. Why is it important? Because things can change, unlike when you're in the on-premise environment, where you make a very large investment in capital expenses and then you're sort of forced to live with what you have. When you're in the cloud, you don't have to do things that way. And to be excellent operationally means, how can I incrementally improve my environment in small, easy steps? So it's a core way of being excellent in this way. And that really lends itself to infrastructure as code. So how do you do that? How do you build your infrastructure as code? What are the things that are important when you do it that way, so that you can improve and you can change your approach if business conditions require that? How do you anticipate failures? So something always fails, especially when you have infrastructure as large as the cloud. So for example, how do you work in the scale out capabilities of the cloud to cover failure modes, for example? How do you worry about disaster recovery? And then how do you capture this over time? So failures will happen, things will happen in your environment that you want to be able to recover from operationally more elegantly in the future. So the learning part of it, the documentation part of it, how you build that into part of your overall product design process is a core part of this pillar. Security standpoint. So security is really multi-level, and the strategic approach to going through the process and the questions really lends itself to that. So security needs to be multi-level. It needs to be everything from the identity and access management to the permissions, to making sure that you take approach of a least permissive approach to who can do what. These are all parts of it, and And as you work your way up to security levels and the security layers, ensuring that you really using best practices at each one. And the approach takes you through that process. So there's personal security, there's infrastructure security, then there's data security, and then there's the back end of it, which is how do you log, how do you manage logging, how do you dig in after you do have an event, and look at security, not only going forward, but also looking in the past to see what you need to do better in the future. This is often an area where the holes that are discovered are really mission critical. It's the best architected, even the best architected environments over time can open up holes, and doing a well-architected review on a fairly regular basis for each of your workloads can point these out and help you get ahead of the curve versus the bad guys. The reliability pillar. So reliability is an interesting one because reliability is really one that you want to dial in. So there might be some workloads where you really don't care that much about reliability, maybe in the development process or in the staging process, and you'd much rather save on costs than have 99.999% uptime. So you want to take a look at a particular workload and understand proactively how much reliability you want in that workload, because many times the more reliability you have directly translates into how much cost you're going to spend for it. That said, those mission critical workloads, especially if they're customer facing, really do need to be reliable. And in the world of the 24/7 internet, reliability can really cost a lot if it's not there. So how do you design for those principles? How do you automatically recover from failures? How do you test recovery when there is a problem? And here, especially, we want to understand what is the gameplay. How often do you do it? How do you do it? How do you insert failures into production or production-like environments and recover so that when the unexpected happens, you really are prepared for it? There's also an area where working in the cloud is very different from working on premise, in that you want these applications to be able to scale horizontally versus scale vertically with on-premise equipment that you actually have. So you have the ability here to build in reliability up front just by the very nature of the way the cloud can scale horizontally. From a reliability standpoint, this next one actually fits in a couple of the pillars, but stop guessing about capacity. So reliability isn't just about something breaking, it's about what happens when something breaks at scale. So a sudden surge of usage, for example, can slow things to a crawl, in some cases even break workloads. So how do we take a strong approach and a strategy at understanding what the capacity needs are in light of how reliable and usable the actual environment is? And then lastly, if we're going to do change, and if we're going to change things in the environment, make sure we do that in an automated way. Because if you have unforeseen problems where a change does affect your reliability, how do you roll back quickly, for example? And by automating the way deployments happen really helps manage those changes and in fact roll back if necessary. And when you roll forward, it gives you an easy, quick, fast way to do it. We found something that there is a problem. I have to make those changes and make them quickly because Black Friday is coming up or some other usage event is coming up that you want to be able to act quickly. How do we make sure we perform efficiently? So performance is an interesting one. Performance doesn't necessarily mean just how fast something happens, but it also means that I have the necessary performance for a particular use case when I need the performance. So that means, how do I scale up and scale back when I need to, and how do I do that quickly? How do I use new technologies that are coming out? For example, there's lots and lots of new non-Intel instances that Amazon has just released. Some of them might perform better at a lower cost. So how are we efficient in the performance that we use? Maybe you could take advantage of GPUs in certain areas for certain workloads that you haven't done that before. Maybe take a little re-architecting, but it could potentially make you much more performant and efficiently performant as well. If I have the need for performance in new places, how do I do that? So how am I able to move my performance around geographically where it's required? Does it make sense to re-architect my applications in general? You know, especially if you're moving off on-premise or off monolithic software architectures. Going serverless can really help in terms of how performant you can be and how easily it is to scale from a performance standpoint. Also helps on the cost standpoint, which we'll talk about in a second. But going serverless as much as possible as a strategy, not only for cost, but also for performance, is a key way to help over time. Experimentation, especially in the cloud, it makes it much easier to do that. So try some different instance types, try different use cases or different usage patterns and see what happens. Mechanical sympathy is one where, is there a way to disconnect particular infrastructure from what the application is actually doing? So in other words, how sticky do my applications have to be for particular infrastructure? And it helps if you can disentangle these two things so that your applications can run where it makes the most sense versus having to run on particular architectural constraints. Cost optimizations. This one's near and dear to Tracklt's heart. As many of you know, we have some of our own applications and things that we use to help customers cost optimize. But to do cost optimization, there's several things that if you're not doing, you definitely should be doing, and the Well-Architected Framework will help expose those. So definitely implement all the cloud financial management tools that AWS has at its disposal. So Cost Explorer and other tools that are available, use those. Make sure you do a really good job of tagging all of your assets so you can roll those back and either charge back to the organizations or at least dig into where your costs are coming from. Very, very important. Adopt a consumption model. This kind of goes back to doing what you can, anything in terms of being serverless that you can. So it's really, the buffet model, only eat what you're going to eat at that point in time. Try not to have to buy resources that aren't going to be used at 100%. So how do we do a better job of paying as you go? Measurement and test is really important. So how do we figure out a process whereby we look at the environment, look at the infrastructure, and analyze if it's being used efficiently, and if there's wasted resources that we can either re-architect out of so we don't have to pay for those resources, or right size so we can only pay for resources to the extent that we actually need them. Spending money on undifferentiated heavy lifting. This really goes to how you define the resources that are necessary for particular tasks. So let's make sure that, and the Well-Architected Framework will take you down the path of understanding where you're spending money, where maybe it doesn't bring you all the bang for the buck. So looking at your spend and saying, okay, is it worth the money I'm spending on here for this particular thing, or isn't it? So let's understand what's really bringing value to the business, make sure that's where we're spending the money, and not spending money where it's not bringing the value. And then this last bullet, analyze and attribute expenditures. This goes back to my comments about making sure we do a really good job of tagging and then looking at those. And there's a lot of tools available, including some upcoming tools that can help with that, to really make sure that we understand who is using the money, how it's being used, where it's being used, and how we charge for that money, or how we charge back.
I need your consent on a few items.
So let's talk about the program itself. So the way a well-architected review works is that I should mention, it's a tool that the end user can use themselves. You can go right to the AWS console and get into the well-architected components, and you can actually do this in-house. However, if you do it through a partner, which is a well-architected partner like Tracklt is, you get a whole bunch of other benefits. So the first is that you actually have a third party who's going to proactively go in, schedule the interviews, write the reports, and come back with you with suggested remediation. So you'll have somebody who will actually do the process for you. But more importantly, the second part of that is if there is remediation that is suggested and discovered, that partner can build a statement of work around that remediation. And I have a couple other points here, but if the remediation covers at least 25% of the high risk remediations, and it is performed, AWS will actually come back and give the end user a $5,000 credits for the work. So the way that works from a partner perspective is we will charge you for what's in the statement of work, and you will pay us that money, but AWS will come back and actually give you $5,000 worth of credits towards anything that's in the statement of work. So a consulting partner like us might come with only $5,000 worth of remediation, and that'd essentially be at zero cost to you because AWS would give you those credits and you can apply those to your monthly bill. Those credits are good for 6 months, and it's just something you use and put towards your AWS account. So it can be free. Now, obviously, if there's a lot of remediation that needs to be done, there could be excess work involved, and you either could choose to have a partner like Tracklt do it for you, or you can just take it and run with it yourself. But you do get at least that $5,000 worth of free work, essentially, through the partner. So it's really a cool program. And again, AWS, it's worth it for AWS, that $5,000, because it could make you a happier customer and a more secure customer and reflects well on their service overall. So just from a higher level, the intent of a review, it's workload specific. So workload is basically defined as one thing for your business. So it might be, for example, your ERP system, or it might be your customer-facing website, or it might be order tracking, or any specific workload. And another cool thing about the Well-Architected Framework program is that there really isn't a limit on the number of workloads you can apply a review to. Each one is separate. So workload A is separate from workload B, and AWS will actually fund up to 5K of remediation for each of those separate workloads. And even better, you can do it repetitively over time. So sometimes it makes sense to do a review of a workload every 6 months or every year, for example. 6 months if it changes a lot. Maybe it makes sense to do that. And again, AWS will pay up to $5,000 remediation for each one of those reviews potentially. So it's really cool that it's workload specific and it can happen repetitively over time. And when you work with a well-architected partner, you get that $5,000 credits. As part of it, we really identify the best practices to apply. And at least for Tracklt, we use a very pragmatic approach here. So we use what we've learned in the past. We use our knowledge of, especially on the software development side, of how to build infrastructure as code and do things the right way, which feeds into several of the pillars, is a great way to do that. And I already mentioned about the periodic checkups to the environments. So that's kind of how the overall program works, some of the benefit it gives. I would encourage you to look at the Well-Architected Framework page on the AWS website. It goes into great deal. There's a 97-page PDF that goes over each of the pillars in really gory detail, including talking about what the specific questions are and what you're looking for throughout the overall process. So it's a really very good reference. And if anybody needs that link, I'd be happy to provide it.